Greetings, everyone. Miss Sam here from Siwunelo Secondary. I'll be presenting Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which is we find it on paper 2, section A, source-based questions. It's question 2, the coming of democracy to South Africa and coming to terms with the past. Here we have our historical concepts. Firstly, we have amnesty. An amnesty is an official pardon that has been granted to the perpetrator for crimes that were committed during the apartheid era, and those crimes were politically motivated. And a perpetrator is an individual who committed gross human rights violations during the apartheid era. A victim is an individual whose human rights were violated during the apartheid era. And subpoena was a formal or illegal order that was used to force a person so that they can appear to court and give evidence or hand over important documents. And reconciliation is building peaceful, united future by replacing revenge and denial with public truth-telling, acknowledgement of past suffering, and conditional amnesty instead of mass revenge trials. And reparation, it was a once-off financial payment of 30,000, which was allocated to registered and verified victims. Here are the concepts that I have explained, and this concept are being explained in the context of the TRC. And here we have our background. Now, after 1994, ANC was expected to build a non-racial and democratic South Africa without forgetting the past. And the past that we are talking about is the past that involves apartheid, whereby the gross human rights of Black South Africans were being violated by the apartheid government. And then once a new democratic South Africa had come into existence, the past could not be simply forgotten. And this is because thousands of wounded South Africans had to live with and deal with their painful stories, which often included the loss of their loved ones. And then the ANC solution to forgive without forgetting led to the establishment of the TRC in 1996. It was important that the ANC established the TRC because it couldn't be, it wouldn't be, they couldn't move forward and build a democratic country or a rainbow nation, whereas there are still unresolved past. So it was important that there is closure, there is reconciliation between Black and white South Africans before moving into a democratic country, and so that they can ensure that those gross human rights violations are not repeated in the near future again. And what is TRC? The TRC is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was set up to investigate the violation of human rights under apartheid government. This TRC, it's more like a court, but it's not a court. It's just a commission that deals with the perpetrator and the victims that come forward and tell their stories. And then this was created so that they can uncover the truth about the past and so that they can unify the divided nation scattered by the past conflicts. Now, we move to the reasons for the establishment of the TRC. The reasons for the establishment of the TRC involves to bring about reconciliation to the country. And this reconciliation is between the Black and white South Africans after the apartheid government or the apartheid era. And also to bring about healing and closure to the victims, because it was important that the victims also find out what happened to their families, and also victims can be able to tell their story about what happened to them, and then so that they can get closure moving forward. And also it was established to uncover the truth about the past atrocities and bring evidence. And those past atrocities include what? Include the burning of victims. There were victims that were burned. There were victims that were killed. There were victims that were murdered during the apartheid era. So uncovering the truth helped the victims' family to know what happened to their loved ones. So the establishment of the TRC played a huge role in doing that, and also to allow victims to tell their stories. The victims were given an opportunity to come forward and tell their stories about what happened to them under the apartheid era. and those stories they would tell them in front of the TRC. And also to offer amnesty to perpetrators. This amnesty that was offered to perpetrators, it was offered only if the crimes that were committed by the perpetrators were politically motivated, and then they happened during the apartheid era. If the crimes were not politically motivated, then the perpetrators would not be granted amnesty. So the perpetrators were then, and the establishment of the TRC was there to do what? To offer amnesty to those perpetrators. And then also to prevent such atrocities from happening again, because now South Africa was moving into a democratic country. It was important that the issues are laid out, and the perpetrators and the victims, they have what they have reconciled, and then it will help so that the victim, when they leave the TRC court, they cannot go back and blame the perpetrators or point fingers at the perpetrators. So the establishment of the TRC ensured that by leaving the commission, both the perpetrators and the victims have reconciled and have made peace with one another. And then the last one, it was to achieve full transition and free democracy in South Africa. We have forms of justices. We have retributive justice and restorative justice. Under retributive justice is a theory of criminal justice holding that when a person breaks the law, they deserve to suffer a proportional punishment. This retributive justice was practiced in Germany after the Jewish were killed during the Holocaust. So a form of justice that was used was a retributive justice, not a restorative justice, to say if someone had killed another person, then the best punishment is to also suffer the same consequences or the same the same crime that you had committed. And then restorative justice, it means healing the nation by uncovering the truth about past human rights abuses. And then it prioritized repairing harm, restoring victims' dignity, and granting amnesty to perpetrators in exchange for full confessions rather than using retributive punishment. This restorative justice was derived from the retributive justice because the TRC they took what was being done in Germany, but for them, they opted for restorative justice because they were looking forward to building a rainbow nation, to building a peaceful nation. So it wouldn't make sense for them to use retributive justice if they are trying to find a common ground between blacks and white South Africans. So restorative justice was a correct measure that they could implement under the TRC, so that by moving forward, black and white South Africans, they move peacefully. So hence the use of restorative justice so that they can restore peace and order in South Africa. And then the TRC's committee. We have committees in the TRC. Firstly, we have the Human Rights Violation Committee, and then we have the Reparations and Rehabilitation Committee and Amnesty Committee. These committees, they deal with different cases, and then they have their different ways of how they address these cases that are being handed over to the TRC. And these committees fall under the TRC. Our first committee is the Human Rights Violation Committee, not commission. The Human Rights Violation Committee. The aim of the Human Rights Violation Committee was to investigate the human rights that were violated during the regime, and then also to give victims an opportunity to tell their story, and also to gather information based on the crimes that were committed, to find out why a violation was committed and who was the perpetrator who committed the crime. Under the Human Rights Violations Committee, this committee, in short, it was there to investigate. Before the victim or the perpetrator is being called to the TRC commission, they first investigate the type of a crime that the perpetrator committed, whether this crime was politically motivated, whether this crime was committed during the apartheid era. So they first, and also they check what type of human right was violated in this instance. And then we go to the second one, which is the Reparations and Rehabilitation Committee. This committee's aim it was to support and comfort the victims, to recommend reparation and rehabilitations for crimes, and to ensure non-repeat of the human rights violations, to build the minds of victims, and to compensate victims after the disclosure of human rights violations. This reparations and rehabilitation committee was there to ensure that the victims, after they have found out what happened to their loved ones, or they have told their stories to the TRC Commission, they are then being offered some type of a compensation for what they went through, and also they were being offered some sort of a psychologist to take them through the process that they were in, the process that involves going back to the events that took place during the apartheid era. And also this reparation and rehabilitation committee was also working in terms of the perpetrator to ensure that they have rehabilitation centers for the perpetrators who committed those gross human rights violations, and also to ensure that the perpetrators do not repeat the same crimes that they committed during the apartheid era. And also in the reparations committee, they offered victims 30,000 once-off payment, which was paid to the victims' families. Then the last committee, it was the Amnesty Committee. This Amnesty Committee's aim was to give perpetrators an opportunity to apply where necessary. It promoted truth-telling and full disclosure, and then it investigated whether the crimes were politically motivated or not. This committee was important because it ensured that whatever evidence that was gathered during the commission, then this committee was there to ensure if the perpetrator is eligible to be granted amnesty or not. And also there was a thin line between getting amnesty or not getting amnesty.
The hot syrup into a glass jar.
All right. The Amnesty Committee. This committee's aim was to give amnesty to the perpetrators, and amnesty is an official pardon that has been granted to the perpetrators who committed gross human rights violations during the apartheid era. And this amnesty could only be granted if the perpetrator made a full disclosure, told everything that happened during the apartheid era, and also to ensure that this perpetrator, the crimes that they committed were politically motivated. We have the hearings of the TRC. The TRC hearing started in April 1996, and it took place in many venues: Cape Town, Johannesburg, and also Randburg in Rema Bible Church. And all political parties were encouraged to come before the commission, and perpetrators and victims were encouraged to come before the commission. The proceedings of the TRCs were broadcasted in radio and television, and it lasted for 3 years. And the TRC had to gather the information and put it to the then president in a form of a report. And perpetrators who disclosed atrocities that were committed were granted amnesty, but only if those crimes that they, or atrocities that they committed, were meeting the criteria of the Amnesty Committee. And then victims who told their stories, they got what they got, a compensation. Responses to the TRC. The National Party, which was the party that apartheid was introduced under, the NP, never welcomed the TRC, and it was not happy because they felt like it was a witch hunt. They did not support the TRC, and then it regarded it as a witch hunt or a strategy that was used to seek the truth and then punish the perpetrators. And then de Klerk took the commission to court. And this shows that the National Party was not happy with the establishment of the TRC. For them, it was like an attack. Hence, most of them did not appear in the TRC. Then the ANC. ANC did not want to be exposed. They did not want the report to be submitted to the president. Senior leaders regarded crime committed not acquainted or associated to apartheid regime. It was a toothless organization, and senior leaders of NP refused to appear before the TRC. In terms of the ANC, there were other leaders or black people who also committed the atrocities during the apartheid regime, and most of them, they did not want their acts to be exposed. So me saying this is like telling you that it was not only the white people that were involved in committing the gross human rights violation during the apartheid, but there were also black people who were part of the violation of gross human rights. And then the Inkatha Freedom Party. The Inkatha Freedom Party criticized the commission. They did not support the TRC. It was used as a third force. They said that the TRC was biased, unfair, or partial, and they said that it was too victim-friendly, and then it humiliated the perpetrators. Then we have the successes of the TRC. The TRC, it ran as it was planned, 3 years plan, and then it managed to unite South Africans, black and white South Africans. It gave perpetrators an opportunity to apply for amnesty. It brought about reconciliation and healing as both victims and the perpetrators confronted each other. And then they managed to call leaders of the ANC, NP, and IFP, even if most of them did not appear, and then restored relationship amongst South Africans. It also closed the hatred gap that existed between Africans and Europeans since 1950s. The failures of the TRC. It tried to divide South Africans, which is the perpetrators and the victims, because when they were in court, the victims had to face their perpetrators, and some victims did not take it well. And then it gave victims a once-off compensation, which was 30,000, and some victims considered it that it was not enough for them. And also this compensation was given to one victim per victim, 30,000 per family, even if the victims were 2 in one family, but that 30,000 was given to for one family. And then not all victims were willing to forgive, and some did not want perpetrators to walk free. They wanted those perpetrators to be arrested and not be granted amnesty. And then ANC wanted blanket amnesty, which is total, complete, and then W. de Klerk refused to appear before the commission, and some victims did not receive compensation, and most perpetrators claimed that they were following orders from their bosses. They did not want to take accountability of their actions, and some victims refused to forgive the perpetrators. Then now we have the source-based skills, how to address the source-based skills. With the source-based, we have different ways on how to address them, especially when you are writing an exam. We have our cognitive level, we have our historical skills, and typical questions that are asked. And then in those cognitive level, we have level 1, we have level 2, and we have level 3. Under level 1, mostly it's about, not mostly, it's about extracting evidence from the source, taking evidence exactly as it is, and then you write it down on your answer sheet from the source. You do not add anything, you do not remove anything, you extract evidence as it is from the source. and then you select relevant information from sources that answers the question that you are being asked. And then also we define historical terms. Typical questions that you can get from level 1 is that what or who according to the source, quote from the source, or state what according to the source. In terms of level 1 questions, it's much easier to answer because they are like low-hanging fruit and you are more likely to get a total when you are answering level 1 questions, because most of the questions that addresses level 1 questions, they have a way of being asked. Let's say, for instance, they are saying, where does Desmond Tutu comes from? And then in the source, they will be telling you that Desmond Tutu comes from Bloemfontein. Then you know that this is where you are going to extract your information from when you quote or when you tell what comes from the source. And then when you quote from the source, it's very important that you take that information that you are quoting exactly as it is. Then you also put there the quotation marks to show that it has been quoted from the source. Also, with the quotation from the source, you do not add, you do not remove anything. You write it exactly as it is. And then you state what according to the source. Those are low-hanging fruits. Those are questions that a learner is more likely to get a total when they are addressing. And then we have our level two questions. Mostly it's about explanation of historical concepts or terms, and then in the context of, and then interpretation of evidence from sources, and then analyzing evidence from sources. When you explain in the context of, it means a learner must not just give out an explanation based on the dictionary meaning, but it should be in the context of the content that they are addressing. And then the typical questions that we are more likely to get in level 2s are, why do you think? Explain in your own words. Explain the symbolic representation of the following. And then we have our level 3. Our level 3 is the interpretation and evaluation of evidence from the sources. You determine the usefulness, the reliability, the biasness, as well as the limitations of the sources. Then you compare and you contrast interpretations presented in the source. Then the typical questions that you are more likely to get is comment on the usefulness of, the limitations, the reliability of the source, comparison, and also the paragraph writing. Those are level 3 questions. And then let us check the skills in answering the source-based questions. How do we address the reliability of the source? The questions mostly, or how you address the reliability of the source, you'll have to check, firstly, what type of a source it is. Is it a primary or a secondary source? A primary source, it's a source that comes directly from a person that was present during the event. A primary source is first-hand information. And then a secondary source is not a first-hand information. It's information that was taken from somewhere, but it is not a first-hand information. Then we regard it as a secondary source. So if you want to check if the source is reliable, then it needs to be what? A primary source. And then we also check who created the source, the author. Who is the author of the source? Is the author of the source relevant to the source that you are being given? And then also we check, when was the source created, the date. If, let's say, for instance, this source, it talks about the dates of, let's say, the TRC hearings that happened in 1996. And then on the source, it says that it shows the date of 2002 or maybe 2025, then this source is not reliable. It means the information has been altered with. So knowing when this source was created and how it links to the reliability of the source is important. And then why was it produced? Why was the source created? What is the purpose of this source being there? And then where was it produced? And then the second one is the usefulness of the source. What does the source tell you? The validity, who created the source, when was it created? You look at the purpose. Is it informative or opinionated? Is the source positive or negative? With the usefulness of the source and the reliability, in most question papers, they do not put them in the same question. If there is the reliability of the source, then there won't be the usefulness of the source. But if they are asking you about the usefulness of the source, then they won't ask you about the reliability of the source. Because how you address them, it's more or less the same, but there is a thin line between how you address them. And then we check the limitations of the source. The limitations of the source also can be the biasness of the source. We check if the source is one-sided, the facts are deliberately omitted, exaggerated, or they are of propaganda. Mostly in sources that have limitations, they have one side of the story. They will maybe be too positive or too negative. And if there's one thing that Elena should know is that there won't be a question asking about the limitations of the source if the source does not have a limited information. Then how do you see if this source is limited? For instance, let's say the source is asking you or is telling the information about the apartheid era, and then they are the information that they are giving is that the whites were brutal towards blacks and all that. That information is exaggerated. That information is biased. They are not telling what happened further. They are not discussing events that are fully. And then also we have comparison of the sources. Compare information from sources, whether it be similarities or differences. And then in this one, how they ask it is that how does source A support source B, or how does source A contradicts the information in source B? So you are expected to gather information from both sources which correspond or differ to each other. So the question will either be how does they support, which is similarities, or how does they contradict each other, which is differences. Now, how do we address these issues, these sources? I mean, for instance, you'll be given information in source 2A and information in source 2B. They are looking for what? They are looking for similarities. Now, Elena, when you are addressing this issue, this question, you are going to say, for instance, source A says that Desmond Tutu was I'm trying to find an example. Or let's say, source 2A says that the victims were burned, they were poisoned, and they were thrown into the river. That's what source 2A says. We are trying to find the similarities. And then source 2B, you will have to find the information that links to someone being killed, someone being poisoned, or someone being thrown into the river. So how are you going to put it? You're going to say, source 2A says that the victim was burned, they were poisoned, and they were thrown into the river. And source 2B confirms this by telling us that the victims were never found again. Then that shows that them being thrown into the river, they were never found. So that same information, you are finding it where? You are finding it in source 2B. Now, in short, you can't say now in source 2A the victims were killed, but in source 2B you are giving us information that says the victims were still alive. You need to tell us the similarities of these two sources. And remember, it's 4 marks. So meaning you are going to give similarity number 1 and similarity number 2. The first similarity must not be of the same of this similarity number 2. And then also you need to check the linking words. In terms of the similarities, source 2A says this and this and this, and source 2B confirms this by saying this and this and this. And then when it comes to contradiction or how these sources are different from one another. You are going to say now, source 2A says that the victims were taken to the police station, questioned, and then released. Whereas the linking word in here, you can't say "and" because we are doing what? The information that you are giving, it's contradicting. So you're going to say, whereas source 2B tells us that the victims were killed and they were never found. So this information is doing what? It is contradicting to one another. They are not the same. They are not telling us the same information. So that is how you address them, to address the contradiction. And same applies with the contradiction. You give the first contradiction, source 2A says this and this, whereas source 2B states this and this and this. Then you skip a line. That is your first 2 marks. And then the second 2 marks, it's whereby you are saying source 2A says this and this and this and this, whereas in 2B it states this and this and this. Then that's where you are going to get your full 4 marks. And then we have our paragraph writing. Remember, in our paragraph writing, you only write 1 paragraph, and also a paragraph question will always instruct you to use the information in relevant sources as well as your own knowledge to write a paragraph. And this means that you read and analyze relevant sources and see what information or evidence they give you regarding the key question. And where do we find the key question? The key question, we find it on your, when you are starting to write your question paper. There's a key question there that will guide you on what the sources is about. So you take that key question when you are about to write your question paper. And we all now know that you cannot write your source-based questions without reading the sources. So the simpler way to do it is that you have your pencil with you. You check, what does the key question want? Let's say it wants, how successful was the TRC in dealing with the victims and the perpetrator cases? What are we looking for? We are looking at the successes. How successful was the TRC? So you having your pencil, what do? As you are going through your source A, trying to answer questions from source A, you are also keeping in mind the key question, that this is what the key question wanted. So you underline important information that answers the key question in each and every source that you are going through, or in each and every source that you are addressing. You underline that information, relevant information. And then the information in those sources, it will guide you on how to answer the question. And then after doing that, you go to your 2.6 question, the paragraph question. When you address that question, firstly, there must be an opening statement. Now, how do we formulate an opening statement? Now, let's say, for instance, the question was saying, how was the TRC successful in dealing with the cases of Steve Biko? You are going to say, when you open a statement, the TRC was successful in dealing with the case of Steve Biko because, and then you do what? You follow with the information. That because will guide you on the information, the relevant information that you have to write in your source base. And then that relevant information, what do? You have to state now, where did you get it from? For instance, you are going to write the sentence, and at the end of the sentence, you write source 2A, you close brackets. And also, it is important to remember that when you write a paragraph, you have to write 8 lines. And also, you must paraphrase the information. You do not take it exactly as it is from the source. You paraphrase it. By paraphrasing it, you can look for the synonyms. You look for the synonyms of the information that you got on the sources. You do not write it as it is, because by writing it as it is, it will result in you losing your marks. You'll be given 0 because they will say that you got this information from the source. You do not use your own knowledge. So it is very important to note that when you are addressing the paragraph question, you must firstly have an opening statement and then state the reasons why you are saying that. And then by stating those reasons, you do not write them in a point form. You write them in a paragraph, and your paragraph must run coherently. So You must write it coherently and then ensure that you do not skip any lines when you are writing that paragraph. It should be one paragraph. Then that's how we address our paragraph question. And then now, let's see how do we answer the source-based questions. I got a question paper, a previous question paper. This is the key question. Why did the TRC reject the amnesty applications of the perpetrators who tortured reference Chenwani Farisani? Okay, now let's go through source 2A. The extract below was taken from the funeral program of Reverend Chenwani Farisani. The funeral took place on 7 June 2025. It focuses on Farisani's political activism against the apartheid government, which led to his imprisonment in the 1980s. Now, what are we looking for in our sources? We are looking for why did the TRC reject the amnesty applications of the perpetrators who tortured who? Referent Farisani. Now, Farisani was a founding member of the Black People's Convention and served as its president from 1973 to 1975. He worked closely with Stephen Bantu Biko and other leaders of the Black Consciousness Movement. He co-founded the Black Evangelical Youth Organization in the 1970s with current South African President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa and Chifiwa and Lawrence. This initiative evolved into the Bold Evangelical Christian Organization and later the Evangelical Christian Outreach. Now, between 1977 and 1987, Farisani was detained without trial on 4 separate occasions as a result of his outspoken opposition to apartheid. During these incarcerations, he was subjected to brutal torture, including beatings, electric shocks, and prolonged isolation. His 1982 detention, one of the most widely documented cases of political abuse under apartheid, drew international criticism, and Amnesty International, having declared him a prisoner of conscience, organized a global campaign demanding his release, which ultimately succeeded. And his suffering became symbolic of the regime's cruelty and helped expose the extent of the state-sponsored violence. And in 1986, Farisani testified before U.S. congressional committees, recounting his experiences in chilling detail, a testimony that led to formal resolutions in both the Senate and House of Representatives, urging the South African government to end its persecution of him and other activists. Now, let us check the source-based questions. Now, 2.1.1, it says here, name from the source 2 organizations within the Black Consciousness Movement, which Farisani served as a founding member. Now, how do we answer this question? It's an extraction. It's an extraction of evidence, meaning the answer here, it comes directly from the source. The answer is there. Remember, the question was saying that name from the source 2 organizations within the Black Consciousness Movement. Now, what's important in answering the source-based questions is knowing that there's no way that the first question, the answer of it, you'll find it on the last paragraph. Mostly, the answer of the first question will be on the first paragraph. So our answer there, if we check, he was part of the Black People's Convention as well as the BIO. It's there, it's written there. It said he worked closely with Stephen Bantu Biko and other leaders of the Black Consciousness Movement. And also, he co-founded the Black Evangelical Youth Organization. So the answer here is there. We look back, Farisani was a founding member of the Black People's Convention and served as its president. So the correct answer is there, the BPC as well as the BEYO. Those are the correct answers for number 2.1. And then we look closely at 2.1.2. Also, it's another extraction, which is a level 1 question. It says there, state any 3 types of abuses according to the source that Farisani was subjected to during his imprisonment during 1977 and 1987. We look at the marker location. The marker location states that it's 3 times 1. So meaning the learner must give out 3 answers. What are we looking for? We are looking for the types of abuses according to the source that Farisani was subjected to. We check there on paragraph number 2. It says he endured brutal torture, beatings, electric shocks, as well as prolonged isolation. So you are going to find your answer on paragraph number 2. It is also an extraction of evidence from the source. And if you can see clearly, the question states types of abuses. Here in the source, it tells you that during this incarceration, he was subjected to brutal torture. Already, the question will lead you to where the answer is. That even if in the question it's not written as brutal torture, but you know that brutal torture, it's also part of the abuse. So the answer, you'll find it there. And then we go to the next question, which is 2.1.3. Explain why Amnesty International declared Farisani a prisoner of conscience. This is a level 2 question. Most of the learners, they make a mistake of doing what? Of rewriting the same question and use it as an answer. The explain question, it wants you as a learner to do what? To use your mind to answer this question. Now it says, why Amnesty International declared Farisani a prisoner of conscience? Why was he declared a prisoner of conscience? It means here you cannot write exactly what's written there. You need to explain it further to say why. Now, the answer will be that because the injustices meted out against Farisani due to his political beliefs were wrong. So meaning his arrest and him being beaten up, it was not what he deserved. So he was a prisoner of what? Of conscience. And then 2.1.3 or 2.1.4, it says define the term persecution in your own words. What is persecution in your own words? And then it is a cruel or unfair treatment of people because of their beliefs. That is the definition of persecution. Now, there's a difference between defining the term in your own words and explaining it in the context of. So here it wants you to explain it in your own words, not in the context of. If it was saying in the context of, then it meant a learner would have to use what? Would have to use words like TRC, apartheid, and all that. And then we go to sources 2B. Our source 2B says here, the source below is a part of a testimony given by Farisani at the TRC Human Rights Violation Committee hearing, which was held in Venda on 4 October 1996. It is a recollection of Farisani's experiences at the hands of the Venda Security Branch policemen during his period of detention. Now, this is a testimony by Farisani himself. So this clearly shows that this is a primary source. Says here, I was interrogated every day. There where I was tortured, I was interrogated because the first thing which was said was the letter which was written by Mr. James Silimela and Mr. Makwaba, Venda Security Branch policemen. I don't hate them. They must tell the truth. They put a bag on me. They poured some glue-like things. You know, they were just sticky. In my imagination, when they were shocking, I couldn't feel the electricity in the substance properly. Well, they tied those electrical devices on my ears. They poured water, some water just on the floor, while my whole body was just feeling pain. I fell in the water and I was just falling down, rising and taking off the bag, asking me a lot of questions. The electric devices were taken from the head to the toes and the thighs and even in the private parts. My intestines were jumping. As it was happening, Ramaligela, member of the vendor security branch police, started a song. Hallelujah, call on your God, he'll come and help you. I'm not lying about Ramaligela. Why should I lie about him? He knows very well that is true. I was made to do press ups to stand on my head. How can I stand on my top? You know, I was very short and heavy. They took me and made me stand on my head and then they kicked me. And could I just say one final thing? One reason I bring the family here, one reason I want to support is that many of these evil people, and I don't use the word evil easy as a pastor, but we should dwell over or speak about evil and brutal men and women because unless they came out and confess, sooner or later they will come back. So that is there. That is the information that was given by referent Farisani. Now let us look at the questions that addresses this source base. Sources to be 2.2.1. Give the names of any two vendor security branch policemen in the source implicated by Farisani. Now, Mr. Jem Silimela, as well as Mr. Magwaba. They want two. And then the next question will be 2.2.2. What does the statement, I don't hate them, they must tell the truth, suggest about Farisani's testimony? What does it say about his testimony? Says here, I don't hate them. I just want them to tell the truth. Now, as a historian, how you address this question will be that it shows that Farisani was showing his willingness to restore relations with his torturers in a spirit of reconciliation, provided that they reveal the truth. Because what do you mean you do not hate them? They must tell the truth. It shows how genuine he was in his testimony. It shows that he was telling the truth. And then we have 2.2.3. Explain what the phrase or phrase, call on your God, he'll come and help you, suggest about the tactics that were used by the security branch policemen during the interrogation. This is a level 2 question. What does the phrase, call on your God, he'll come and help you, suggest about the tactics that these security branch policemen were using during the interrogation? Remember, Reverend Farisani was a pastor. So by saying, call on your God, he'll come and help you, it clearly shows that he is undermining the belief or the religious belief that Reverend Farisani has. And also, he was mocking him. He was mocking him to create a psychological distress and completely break him down. And also to use or the use of pretense and dishonest methods of interrogation used by Ramaligela was to create or erode Farisani's confidence in believing that God exists. And then we go to question 2.2.3. Explain 2.2.4. Using the information in the source and your own knowledge, what can you conclude from the words? Unless they come out and confess, sooner or later, they will come back with reference to the perpetrators. Using the information in the source and your own knowledge, meaning here, you're going to take information that comes from the source as well as your own knowledge to now explain what can you conclude from the words unless they come out and confess. Who is they? Sooner or later they will come back with reference to the perpetrators. Now let us go to the source and check this information. Unless they come out and confess sooner or later, they will come back. What does it suggest? It suggests that if there is no full disclosure, perpetrators will continue to commit those human rights abuses. Also, perpetrators of human rights abuses should disclose the whole truth in their quest to find closure and prevent further prosecutions. And lastly, the truth shall set them free so that they will not be haunted by further prosecutions. And then we have 2.2.5. Why would a historian find the source reliable when researching how the TRC's Human Rights Violation Committee dealt with the violations against the referent Farisani? Now, here you have to tell us, how is this source reliable? You have to tell us, how is this source reliable? Now, I'd like to challenge one of the students to tell us now, how can they see that this source is a reliable source? Anyone would like to tell us how can they see that this source is a reliable source? Because I had already explained how is this source reliable, or how to see if a source is reliable or not. Anyone would like to come forward? How is this source reliable? Even if you can write the text, we can read it for you. How is this source reliable? Now, remember, I did explain that in order for you to see if the source is reliable or not, you check the date, the author. Is it a primary source or a secondary source? So now, anyone? Anyone? Okay, let's proceed. Now, this source is reliable. This source is reliable because the testimony in this source contains first-hand information from Farisani regarding how he was tortured, meaning it is a primary source. The information here comes directly from referent Farisani. And also it is from a testimony that referent Farisani presented to the TRC Human Rights Violation Committee hearings. that was held on 4 October 1996 in Van. So the dates in the source corresponds with the actual dates of the events. And then the testimony is published in the TRC final report, and also his testimony regarding torture can be corroborated with other sources. The information in this source corroborates with other information in other sources. And then we have sources 2C. The source below is an extract from the TRC special report of case number AC/99/0238, which was dated 5 May 1999. And it highlights why the TRC's Amnesty Committee rejected the application of 3 vendor security branch policemen, T. Nesemari P. Mananga and M. Ramaligela, who assaulted and tortured Referent Farisani and other victims. It reads as follows. The TRC Amnesty Committee is satisfied that the applications comply with the formal requirements of the Promotion of National Unity and Reconciliation Act of 1995, hereinafter referred to as the Act, and finds that all the acts in respect of which amnesty is sought by the applicants were committed with a political objective as required by the Act. Now, all 3 of the applicants, Nesemari, Mananga, and Ramaligela, testified at the hearing. Both in their written applications and in their oral testimonies, it became clear to the TRC Amnesty Committee that these 3 applicants were constantly playing down their role, meaning they did not disclose their involvement truly so, and involvement in the assault and torture of the victims who were tortured separately, but from whose evidence a picture of consistency in the methods employed became obvious. And the use of a bag filled with water over their heads, the application of electric shocks to their ear loops and private parts, the pulling of their hair from various body parts, the instructions to do tiring exercises, and vicious assaults by the applicants by using their bare hands emerged during the evidence of the victims so consistently that the committee could not accept the truth of their testimonies. The committee is not satisfied that the above 3 applicants have made a full disclosure of all relevant facts as required by Section 20 of the Act, and their applications must consequently fail. So these are the reasons why the amnesty applications of these following perpetrators was rejected. Now, let us look at the questions that addresses this source based. It says here, quote one piece of evidence from the source which suggests that the TRC Amnesty Committee was satisfied with the amnesty applications by the 3 policemen complied with the requirements of the TRC Act. We need to find one piece of evidence, and that one piece of evidence will give us 2 marks. Let us see, it's question 2.3.1. Now, let us check what evidence is there. Amnesty is required by the Act. This is our answer for question 2.3.1. And like I said, what do? You include your quotation marks. Says here, finds that all the acts in respect of which amnesty is sought by the applications were committed with a political objective as required by the Act. Then we move to the next question. Name 3 applicants according to the source, who applied for the amnesty for the assault and torture of Referent Farisani. We are looking for 3 applicants. Who are the perpetrators? Who are those applicants? Like I said earlier on, that it's nice with the source-based questions because the questions, they guide you on where to find the answers. The question was asking for 3 applicants. Now, where are these 3 applicants? They are here. It's Nesamari, P. Mananga, and M. Ramaligela. Those are your 3 applicants. And then we move to the next question. Explain the term oral testimonies in the context of the TRC's hearings by the Amnesty Committee. This one is in the context of, so it is very important for a learner that when you address this question, you use in the context of the TRC's hearings. You don't just say oral testimony. It is when someone who committed a crime gives out their testimony in court. You'll get it wrong. You must do what? You must answer it in the context of the TRC's hearings. What are those oral testimonies in the context of the TRC? Now, how can we best address that? It is a first-hand memories or accounts that are given by the amnesty applicants relating to the human rights abuses committed against Farisani or any victims in their quest for amnesty. Remember, when you are addressing, explain the term in the context of, there must be the TRC hearing, there must be the name of the person that is giving that oral testimony, those important facts that direct us to the fact that you are talking about the context of the TRC. Then you will get it right. Then the next question is 2.3.4. What conclusions can be drawn from the statement? The TRC's Amnesty Committee is not satisfied that the above 3 applicants have made a full disclosure as required by the Act. Now, it says here the applicants did not tell the whole truth as was expected by the TRC, and then the testimonies given by the applicants were not sufficient to make them qualify for amnesty. That is the conclusion that can be drawn to say now the evidence that they made was not sufficient enough to make them qualify for amnesty. And what is the reason for that? It is because under amnesty, for you to get to be granted amnesty, you must make a full disclosure. You must tell anything but the truth. And then 2.4 says here, refer to sources 2B and 2C. This is a comparison. Source 2B and 2C, and explain how evidence in 2B supports the information in 2C. We are looking for what? How does the evidence in 2B support the information in 2C? You do not just end there, but we need to see what is it that you are comparing with regards to the human rights violations that were committed against Referent Farisani. You are not just comparing anything, but we are looking for what? We are looking for the human rights violations that were committed against Referent Farisani. And those violations are there in source what? In source 2B and sources 2A. Now, let us check what are those comparisons. Number 1, let us look at source 2B. It says here, these are the human rights violations that were committed against him. They put a bag and poured some glue-like things that were sticky. And then they tied those electrical devices. We are just trying to gather information about the gross human rights that were violated against him. Then they poured water, and then he fell into the water and was just falling down. And then the electric devices were taken from the head to the toes and the thighs. And then yeah, oh, they made him do press ups, stand on his head. Now, these are the gross human rights violations that were committed against Farisan. Let's see on source 2C. On source 2C, it says victims were tortured, but those the use of bag filled with water all over their heads. It's here also on source 2C. The application of electric shocks to their ear loops and private parts. The pulling of hair from various body parts. Instructions to do strenuous and tiring exercises and vicious assault by applicants using their bare hands. Now, you see this information in source 2C matches the information in source 2B. Now, how do we construct it into an answer now that is answering this question of sorting 2.4? We are going to start by saying source 2A, it mentions that the bag was pulled over. It's here. The bag, they put this bag, the bag was pulled over his head, and then in order to torture him. Now, it's also here in source 2C that you're going to say, and source 2C states that the use of a bag filled with water was put over their heads. Now, you see this information matches with this information. You can't say the bag, they put a bag on me and they poured some glue-like things, and then you are going to say the TRC Amnesty Committee was satisfied that the applications comply with the formal. No. If you are going to talk about the bag here in source 2B, then you also must provide the same information in source 2C. So that will be your first 2 marks. And then your second 2 marks, you will say here, source 2B, it states here that Farisani was made to do press-ups and to stand up on his head. Now let's see on source 2C, which information here shows that press ups were made, even if it's not press up, but those tenuous exercises, you can say source 2C states that they were instructed to do strenuous or tearing exercises and vicious assault by the applicants using their bare hands. Now, this is how source 2B supports the information in sources 2C. Hopefully, it makes sense now. And then we go to source 2D. Source 2D, it's a visual source. It's a visual source. It states here, the cartoon below is by J. Shapiro, which was taken from the book Truths Drawn in Jest, Commentary on the TRC Through Cartoons, and it was edited by W. Verwoerd and M. Mabizela. It depicts Dula Omar, which was the former Minister of Justice who was responsible for the TRC, revealing the truth about human rights violations of political activists during the apartheid era. Now, the information in both frames, frame A and frame B, have been retyped below the cartoon for clarity. Ne? And then here we have a picture of Mr. Dula Omar. And then here it shows what's being there. Then Commission of Truth and Reconciliation. And then he's holding something like a paper. And then underneath that paper, there are policemen. And using the interpretation of a historian, you'll know that these policemen are perpetrators. Now, on this paper that Dula Omar is holding, it's written, hit him. It means hit him on his head or in his body, put a bag over his body, couldn't breathe, attached the battery, he screamed, could not stop shaking. So what Dula Omar is holding, he's holding an information of the atrocities that were committed by these police officers here. And what is he doing? He is exposing this information. to the public. And if you can see the reaction of these police officers, they are sweating. That means they are doing what? They are scared of what is there. They know that by the revealing of this truth, what will happen is that they won't be granted amnesty and they will be found guilty. Let us see the question that addresses this source. It says here, explain the symbolic representation. There's a new way how the question is being phrased. It's no longer what is the message that the source conveys. It's no longer about the message that the source conveys, but now the question comes phrased as the symbolic representation of what's shown in the visual source. Meaning you must interpret this source thoroughly and understand it. Now, let us see if we can explain this symbolic representation of Dullah Omar. In the source, they said that Dullah Omar was the former Minister of Justice. So obviously he is not the perpetrator. So what was he doing? He was revealing the truth about the human rights violations of the political activists during the apartheid era. Now, what is the symbolic representation of this Dullah Omar here? It shows that he was a minister of justice and he was responsible for the TRC. Another answer that you can give is that he was the minister of government and he is shown to be exposing the acts of violence that were committed by the police under the apartheid. As you can see, the hand here holding that information that has the atrocities that were committed by the police officers. And also, Dullah Omar, the Minister of Justice, wanted to ensure that truth-telling as the mandate of the TRC is achieved, that no lies were told by the perpetrators. That is the symbolic representation of Dullah Omar as shown there. And then another symbolic representation that we need to see is the security policemen. What is the symbolic representation of these policemen here that are standing there? As we can see, they are sweating, and this sweating of this police, it suggests that they were very anxious about the truth being revealed because they already told the lies. They did not know that the real truth will be exposed. And also, their facial expression suggests fear of being implicated in human rights violations. They did not tell the whole truth. So Dullah Omar, by holding this, is showing information and evidence that does what? That implicate them in the gross human rights violations of the victims. And then also, they represent the apartheid government. That is the symbolic representation of these pictures, or of the men that are represented in these pictures. Now, that is how you answer these questions, because going forward, that is how this question is being phrased. So it is no longer about what does the message conveys, or you need to tell us what is it that you see in the source, and also analyze it and interpret it and write it down as a historian. Then we go to the next question, which is comment on why the information in frame A differs from frame B regarding evidence presented at the hearings. This question of comment can be tricky, but keep in mind, when you comment, you are saying what you see. So you are commenting now on why the information in frame A is different from frame B. Let us see. Frame A, it says here, the prisoner slipped on the soap he hit his head and later died. But frame B, it says here, hit him, put a bag over his head, he couldn't breathe, he was attacked, then the battery, the electric battery was attached to his testicles, he screamed, could not stop shaking. The information in frame A is totally different from the information that is being shown in B. And it clearly says to us that the information in frame A is the testimony of what the policemen were saying. And it contradicts the information or the testimony of referent that he made to say he was tortured, he was doing this and this, and they did this and this and this to him. So meaning these two information are not there and are not the same. Now, the real truth is what was being told by referent Farisani, which is the information on frame B. Now that Mr. Dula Omar is revealing the real information, these police officers are shaking because they did not tell the whole truth. It means their amnesty application will not be accepted. It goes back to the key question to say, why did the TRC reject the amnesty applications of the perpetrator? Because they lied. They lied about what happened to Mr. Farisani, to Reverend Farisani. And the truth was later revealed by Mr. Farisani himself. And also the Human Rights Committee. They did what? They investigated. And upon the investigations, they uncovered the truth that Reverend Farisani was telling the truth. Now, let us see how can we answer this question. Comment on why the information in frame A differs from frame B. As you comment, you are going to say that frame A refers to the security or policeman's version of hiding the truth. And frame B reveals the hidden human rights violations that were committed by the security policemen. That is how you address this question. To say frame A, it shows the lies that the security policemen told, and frame B, it shows the hidden truth that of what actually transpired during the torture of the victims. And then now we go to 2.6, the last question of the source base. It says here, using the information in relevant sources and your own knowledge, write the paragraph. You see the most important factor here, it's relevant sources and your own knowledge. It means when they say relevant sources, you are not just going to take any information from any source. The information you take from a source, it must be about why the TRC rejected the amnesty applications of the perpetrators who tortured reference Chenwani. So you don't just take any information, you take information that is relevant to what the question is asking you. Now, remember we said that when you write a paragraph question, you must have an opening statement. Now, how do you formulate an opening statement? We need to turn this key question into a statement. How do you turn this key question into a statement? You are going to say, the TRC rejected The amnesty application. The perpetrators. Arisani. Yes. Now this will be your opening statement. What did we do? We turned this key question into a statement. The TRC rejected the amnesty application of the perpetrators who tortured reference Chenwani Farisani. Or you can say the applications of the perpetrators who tortured reference Farisani were rejected by the TRC. Already it is guiding you on where you are going. The second thing that you do is you telling us that why are you saying the amnesty applications of these perpetrators were rejected? Then this is where your paragraph question starts. Now we give us points on why are you saying that. Points from where? Points that you took from your relevant sources. Now let us see in source 2A. Is there any information in 2A that suggests that the amnesty applications of those perpetrators was rejected? The source here, is it relevant? Because it says the extract below was taken from a funeral program of reference Chenwan. The funeral took place on, it focuses on, you see, important part. It focuses on Farisani's political activism against apartheid, which led to his imprisonment. Does this source show any information of whether how Farisani was tortured or killed? It says Farisani was a founding member of Black People's Convention and served as its president from 1973 to 1975. He worked closely with Stephen Bantu Biko and other leaders of the BCM. He co-founded the Black Evangelical Youth Organization in 1970s with current South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Chifua Muofe and Lawrence Korombi, and this initiative evolved into the Bold Evangelical Christian Organization and later the Evangelical Christian Outreach. Between 1977 and 1987, Farisani was detained without trial on 4 separate occasions as a result of his outspoken opposition to apartheid. During these incarcerations, he was subjected to brutal torture, including beatings, electrical shocks, prolonged isolation, and his 1982 detention, one of the most widely documented cases of political abuse under apartheid, through international criticism. Amnesty International, having declared him a prisoner of conscience, spearheaded a global campaign demanding his release, which ultimately succeeded. His suffering became emblematic or symbolic of the regime's cruelty and helped to expose the extent of state-sponsored violence. And in 1986, Farisani testified before the U.S. congressional committees, recounting his experiences in chilling detail, a testimony that led to formal resolutions in both the Senate and House of Representatives, urging the South African government to end its persecution of him and other activists. Now, does any of the information here shows that the reasons why the TRC rejected the amnesty applications uh, uh, um, of those policemen? There's no information. According to what I've read, I can't find anything because there's nowhere that shows that this or in this source any information that shows those police officers in court or that states that those police officers were in court and this is what they were telling the people. I can't find that information here. So therefore, it means this source 2A, it is what it is. It is irrelevant for this questionnaire paragraph, for the paragraph question. So you can't use any information from here because it is not addressing any answer from why did the TRC reject amnesty applications of the perpetrators. Now let us look at sources. Source 2B. Source 2B, we read the top part of it. It says the source below is part of the testimony given by Farisani at the TRC commission. And then it is a recollection of Farisani's experiences at the hands of Venda Security Branch policemen during his period of detention. Now, let us see what does source 2B states. It says here, the source below is part of a testimony that was given by Farisani at the TRC Human Rights Violation Committee hearing held in Venda on 4 October 1996. It is a recollection of Farisani's experiences at the hands of Venda Security Branch policemen during his period of detention. It says here, I was interrogated every day. There where I was tortured. I was interrogated because the first thing which was said was the letter which was written by Mr. James Silimela and Mr. Magwaba, Venda Security Branch policemen. I don't hate them. They must tell the truth. They put a bag on me. They poured some glue-like things. You know, they were just sticky. In my imagination, when they were shocking, I couldn't feel the electricity in their substance properly. Well, they tied those electrical devices on my ears. They poured water. Some water just went on the floor. My whole body was just feeling pain. I fell in the water and I was just falling down, rising and taking off the bag, asking me a lot of questions. The electric devices were taken from the head to the toes and the thighs and even in my private parts. My intestines were jumping. As it was happening, Ramaligela, which is the member of the Venda Security Branch policemen, and if you can check, Ramaligela is not a white person. He's a black person. Hence, I was saying, not all atrocities were committed by white people, but also black South Africans also committed those gross human rights violations. So Ramaligena, which is the member of the Venda Security Branch Police, started a song, Hallelujah, call on your God. He'll come and help you. I'm not lying about Ramaligela. Why should I lie about him? He knows very well that is true. I was made to do press-ups, to stand on my head. How can I stand on my top? You know, I was very stout, short and heavy. They took me and made me stand on my head. And then they kicked me. Could I just say one final thing? One reason I bring the family here, one reason I want to support is that many of these evil people, and I don't use the word evil easy as a pastor, but we should dwell over or speak about evil and brutal men and women because unless they come out and confess sooner or later, they will come back. Now, let us check. Is there information in this source that suggests that the amnesty applications of these perpetrators was rejected, or that gives us reasons as to why would the amnesty applications of these perpetrators could be rejected? As I have read the source, is there any information that tells us this? The information, even if it's not the information, but what we can take from this source is that, firstly, it's a primary source. The person who was making this testimony is a person who was there during the event. So him being the person whose gross human rights were violated and telling the truth was part of the reasons why the amnesty application of those police officers was rejected. So what can we say? We can say that Referent Farisani presented his testimony at the TRC regarding his torture that he suffered at the hands of the security policemen. So now, this comes after you have stated that the amnesty applications of the police officers was rejected because Referent Farisani is the one who presented his testimony at the TRC regarding his torture that he suffered at the hands of the police security men. And then immediately after doing that, what do? You put on the bracket, then you say to be, then you close it. Then you proceed with the other information. Other information that we can take from source 2B is that, again, Referent Farisani's testimony at the TRC explains how the policeman's brutal interrogation was unrelated to any political motive that could qualify them for amnesty. His arrest and them torturing him had nothing to do with any political motive. So it is proven in this source. So you're also going to write 2B. Then you proceed to another point. Source 2C. Remember, we are looking for what? We are looking for information that is relevant to the question statement. The source below is an extract from the TRC special report of case number AC99/0238, which is dated 5 May 1999. It highlights why the TRC's Amnesty Committee rejected the application of 3 vendor security branch officers or policemen, which is Nesemari P. Mananga and M. Ramaligela, who assaulted and tortured Referent Farisani. Now we are going to check, is there any relevant information on source 2C that give us the reasons behind the rejection of the amnesty applications of those policemen? Now the TRC Amnesty Committee is satisfied that the applications comply with the formal requirements of the Promotion of National Unity and Reconciliation Act of 1995, herein referred to as the Act, and find that all the facts in respect of which amnesty is sought by the applicants were committed with a political objective as required by the Act. Now, this paragraph here shows us that the perpetrators, they were eligible to be granted amnesty. And then they because it was found that all the acts in respect of which amnesty is sought by the applicants were committed with a political required by the Act. Meaning, sorry, this paragraph here, it clearly states that the Act of 1995, it finds that all acts in respect of which amnesty is sought by the applicants were committed with a political objective as required by the Act. Meaning this Act, it requires that for an applicant or for an applicant to be eligible to be granted amnesty, they must fit the criteria of the amnesty committee, meaning they must tell the truth and nothing by the truth. Yes, they must tell the truth and nothing by the truth, and to ensure that all crimes that were committed are politically motivated. Now, we check on paragraph number 2. It says all 3 of the applicants, which is Nesemari, Mananga, and Ramaligel, they testified at the hearing. And both in their writing applications and in their oral testimonies, meaning they wrote statements and also they gave out what? Oral testimonies. Now, after all that has been done, it became clear to the TRC Amnesty Committee that these 3 applicants were constantly playing down their role and involvement, meaning they did not tell the whole truth of what actually happened. They tried to make it sound as if they were not involved in the torturing of Mr. Referent. So they downplayed their role. They did not want to disclose fully what they did to Mr. Farisani. And then they did not disclose that they assaulted Mr. Farisani or tortured him. And also, but from those whose evidence, a picture of consistency in the method employed became obvious. So it shows that as much as they downplayed their involvement in this torture, there was an evidence that shows that these applicants were involved in the torturing of Mr. Farisani. Now, how so? The use of a bag filled with water over their heads, the application of electric shocks to their ear loops and private parts, the pulling of hair from various body parts, the instructions to do tiring exercise and vicious assault emerged during evidence of the victims, meaning the TRC saw this. And the evidence that was given by the victims proved that indeed they were tortured. So it was difficult for the TRC to accept the truth of the amnesty applicants, because the victims were telling the same story of what happened, and there was evidence of that. But the perpetrators, they kept on lying. Then the committee is not satisfied. It's not satisfied that the above 3 applicants have made a full disclosure of all relevant facts. So it means as much as these applicants, they think that they have made full disclosure, but the committee, based on the evidence and information they got from the victims, it shows that the perpetrators are not telling the whole truth of what exactly transpired. So this source here is relevant to the paragraph question. It addresses exactly why their amnesty application was not a success. Remember, in order for a perpetrator to be granted amnesty, they must make a full disclosure. And in this case, that was not what happened. Now, let us see the information that we can put in our paragraph. Remember, you do not put it exactly as it is. You have to do what you have to paraphrase. Now, the first one on this paragraph would be that the committee was not satisfied that the 3 applicants had made a full disclosure of all relevant facts. It's here. The committee was not satisfied that the applicants comply with the formal requirements of the promotional of national unity and reconciliation. So what do you do in this case? You do not write it exactly as it is. You need to change some words. Let's say, for instance, the TRC Amnesty Committee is satisfied, says the TRC Amnesty was not satisfied with the fact that the 3 applicants had made a full disclosure of all relevant facts. And then the next one would be the 3 applicants which is Nesemari Mananga and Ramaligela, testified at the hearing. And both in their writing applications and in their oral testimonies, it became clear to the TRC Amnesty Committee that these 3 applicants were constantly playing down their role and involvement in the assault and torture of the victims who were tortured. separately. Now, how do you put this in your paragraph writing? You are going to say now that the 3 applicants constantly did not give enough information of the role that they played in the involvement of the assault. You see, it's in there, but I'm saying of the assault and the torture of the victims who were tortured separately. You just need to put in different words and use them as synonyms so that it doesn't show that you took it directly from the paragraph. You can also write it as the 3 applicants played down their role and involvement in the assault and torture of human rights violation of victims who were tortured separately. It's not the same as what is written here on the source. And then let's see again what information we can get from source 2C. Testimonies of victims were consistent and showed brutal torture methods used against Farisani by policemen that led to the community to not accept the testimony of the policemen. Now, what testimony are we talking about? It's here. The use of bag filled with water over their heads, the applications of electric shocks to their ear loops and private parts, and all that. Those are testimonies that comes from the victims. So they were consistent. They were consistent because here it shows that emerged during the evidence of victims so consistently. So it means the information or evidence that the victims were giving, it was the same, because it was not only Ref Farisani, but there were also victims who were also part of the gross human rights violation that was committed by those policemen. So those victims, they gave the same evidence. So when you write this, you'll say now that the testimonies that are of victims were consistent, meaning they were the same. Their stories did not change, and it showed brutal torture methods used against Farisani by policemen that led the committee to not accept the testimony of the policemen. That is the information we get from 2C. And then we go to source 2D. Meaning this source here is relevant to your paragraph question. It is answering the question of why the amnesty applications of those perpetrators was rejected. Because number one, they did not tell the whole truth. They downplayed their part, and also the applicants, not the applicants, the victims, they told the same story of what happened when they were being tortured. Then in source 2D, let us see in source 2D, is this source relevant to answer the paragraph question? The cartoon below is by J. Shapiro, taken from the book Truth Down in Jest, commentary on the TRC through cartoons edited by W. Verwoerd and M. Mabizela. It depicts Dula Omar, the former Minister of Justice who was responsible for the TRC, revealing the truth about human rights violation of political activists during the apartheid era. And then, like we explained, we have frame 1, we have frame 2. And this information is being held by Dula Omar. And the information that he's holding here is that the first one, it shows the testimony of the police officers. Let's do like this, police officer testimony. And this here, victims testimony. So they are not the same. The police officer's testimony is that these victims, they slept in prison. By sleeping, what did they do? They stepped on a soap and then hit their head and later died. This is what the police officer said. But the victims told a different story, that they were hit with an iron bar. They put a bag over his head. They shocked him with electrical shocks and all that. And then now Dula Omar is doing what? Is revealing that what the police officers were saying is not the same as what the victims are saying. So what did he do? He is now exposing that these police officers who directly applied for amnesty were not eligible to be granted amnesty because they did not tell the whole truth. And the whole truth was later revealed by the testimony of the victims of what exactly happened. And upon realizing that the truth is out, these policemen now they fear that they might be implicated in all of this. Now let us see, how does the information in source 2D answers the paragraph question? The paragraph question of why was the amnesty application of this policeman rejected? Well, on this source, it is clear enough that here is a lie and here is a truth. And this is more than one reason why their amnesty application was rejected. Now, let us see the points that we can put in our paragraph. It says here, evidence in the cartoon highlights the fact that the apartheid security policemen did not always tell the truth, and the TRC did not grant amnesty to the perpetrators. In this one, it might not be written plainly like the other sources, but as a historian, you need to do what? You need to interpret the source and say, you remember that the reason why amnesty is not granted is because of the lies. Now, when you interpret this source, what do you see? You see the lies of the policeman. Now, you take that interpretation, you write it down to say now that evidence in the cartoon, in source 2C, it highlights the fact that the apartheid security men did not always tell the truth, and the TRC did not grant amnesty to the perpetrators because they did not meet the requirements of the amnesty committee of being granted amnesty. And then you also need to state where you got that information from, 2D. And then you move to another one. Let us see if there's another one. You can say security policemen wanted to evade accountability by not telling the truth or making a full disclosure, as seen by their reaction towards the TRC in the cartoon. They did not want to take accountability of their actions because they knew that if they take the accountability for their actions, it means they are implicated and that they will have to answer. They are telling a lie. They won't be granted what? Amnesty. So this sweat, don't overlook such things, guys. Don't overlook such things. It tells you that they are scared. It tells you that they are shocked that the truth is finally out. And by reacting like this, they know what are the consequences of lying to the TRC commission. So this reaction should tell you how they feel about the commission finding out the lies that they told and the actual truth that the victims are telling in their testimony. So the security policemen wanted to evade, meaning they wanted to run away from accountability by not telling the truth or making a full disclosure of the atrocities that they committed towards the apartheid victims. Now, as seen by their reactions towards the TRC. And the security policemen did not want to implicate their principals in the torture of Reverend Farisane. Remember, in the paragraph question, there is also a part where you can also include your own knowledge. Your own knowledge, you don't just include irrelevant information, but you include information that you know is relevant to the key question that you are being asked. Let's say, for instance, we have notes that tells you what happens if the TRC rejects your amnesty applications, or reasons behind the TRC rejecting your amnesty applications. So you can use that as your own knowledge, but you must not derive from the context of the TRC commission. You must always be on point and address the TRC commission. I think our presentation has come to an end. Now I can open for question and answer. Is there anyone that would like to ask any questions? You are more than welcome to ask any question. And also, if you want to clarify or add on, I'm opening this for all of us so that we can be able to chip in. You can even send a message. We can read it out if there's something that you need clarity on and all that. Any question? Can we get any questions? Okay, just to clarify on something, let's say, because I didn't explain that one thoroughly, on comment on what is being said by this and this and this. Let's say, for instance, the question is asking you to comment on what the source is trying to say. Most of the mistakes that the learners do make is that they would take the information that's written there exactly as it is, and then they rewrite it in their question paper. For instance, comment on what is implied by TRC is a witch hunt. And then Elena, when they answer, they will say, because it is a witch hunt. When you comment on something, when you answer the comment on what is implied, it means the examiner already asked you a question, but they need your input on this one. You do not rewrite that information exactly as it is, but what you do is that you take that information, you analyze it. Let's say it's saying comment on what is implied by TRC is a witch hunt. According to you, you need to ask yourself, what is a witch hunt? A witch hunt, it means now that you are going after someone so that you can persecute them. So if they are saying a TRC is a witch hunt, it means the NP government is saying now that the TRC is using this commission to go after the national party so that they can expose them and so that they can persecute them. That is what they are trying to say. When you are commenting on something, it means you do not write it exactly as it is, but uh, um, an examiner might have wrote the question in a certain way, but you need to do what? You need to dwell deep into what the examiner was trying to say. What I normally tell my Netherlands is that what the question on comment on what is implied, it's more like a riddle to say, you are saying, oh, this looks beautiful, or maybe you are reacting in some type of a way, but you do not say it in the exact words. So you as a learner, you need to do what? You need to tell us exactly what the examiner is trying to say. That is how you address the comment on what is implied by the statement. So most of our learners, they make a mistake of rewriting exactly that. If it says comment what is implied by the big fishes did not want to come forward, they will say because the big fishes refused to come to the TRC. You are literally repeating what the question was telling you. So you need to do what? You need to use your own words and explain that when saying this, what's the other way that you can put it rather than what's being said now. That's what the comment on what is implied it means. So I hope even that one is clarified. And also, when it comes to the usefulness of the source, when you look at the purpose, is it informative, fact opinionated, or source positive or negative? Most learners will say it is useful to a historian because they will know about the TRC. You need to tell us that you as a historian, by looking at that source, what is it that you can take? You can say the source is useful because it tells us how TRC was conducting their hearings and that the TRC managed to give victims their closure. Always when you write answers that relate to the usefulness or reliability, you need to ensure that you do what? You you give more information. You don't just leave them hanging. For instance, if you say this source, it is reliable because it is a primary source, you don't just leave it like that. You need to explain why are you saying it is a primary source. It is a primary source because the person who is giving out the testimony was there when the events were taking place. If you say the source is reliable because the dates on the source corresponds with the actual dates of the event. What event are you talking about? You need to be specific of the event that you are addressing. I hope that one is also clear. Any question or any clarity that you need before we wrap up? Okay. No questions? Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully today's lesson was informative, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.